This is Youth Moves Colorado podcast interview on maintaining healthy relationships with Claire, Together's behavioral health and wellness director.
The material and information presented here is provided by Lived Experience Youth and for general information purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are of the guests of our podcast own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Youth Move.
So we're going to talk about maintaining healthy relationships, and that's why we have Claire here. I came up with this question: what is the most important thing that we should know about maintaining a good relationship with just anyone? It can't, it's not limited to family or friends or, just what's a general good thing to maintain?
Yeah, that's a great question, Savannah. I think it just backing up and thinking about what does it mean to have a good relationship. I think that's so individual. Each person has kind of individual needs in relationships. An idea about what a good relationship for me might be really different for you, Savannah. So I think it's always really good to start with understanding what you perceive as a good relationship. And oftentimes I just write a list of what are the most important things to me for me in a relationship, whether that's a friendship or a family relationship or a romantic relationship. It might be different for each one of those things, but usually there's a theme. Maybe it's trustworthiness or shared interests or, fun or sense of humor. So I would just start there thinking about what does it mean for each person to have a good relationship? What would that look like ideally? And then it's also good to reflect on, not every relationship will be the same intensity, right? We have some people in our lives that we're just casual acquaintances with. We have some people that we're friendly with at work. We have friends that we've known for a really long time. We have a big shared history together. And then maybe we have romantic relationships where it's a level of high intimacy or they really know you closely. So it's good to think about relationships on a spectrum and that not every person that you have a relationship with has to be, the best friend or the love of your life, type thing. It's good to think about as relationships as pieces of a puzzle that help complete a bigger picture of your overall wellness. And we all need that. We need people that, we are friendly with, that we say hi to at the gym, but we don't necessarily tell them our whole life story. Or, a colleague at work that really understands your work and can help you out when you're in a pinch, but maybe you don't see them much outside of work. So I think I would start there, Savannah, is thinking about what does a good relationship in that circumstance mean? And then once you know that, then you can think about what are my expectations? So if a good relationship for me is to have 2 or 3 acquaintances that I see once or twice a month, that a good relationship is just to, maybe text once or twice and go out and have lunch with them or coffee, and that'll feel like enough. And so just identifying what my priorities are, what would be the best way to engage with that person, and what my expectations are. Because I think oftentimes in relationships, we get in trouble when we have certain expectations that maybe might be up here and then they're unmet. And so we get frustrated because that person isn't fulfilling what we think the relationship ought to be like.
Yeah, I could totally see that and see how there's different levels for different things. And, just you gotta just be your individual kind of plan of this is how it's gonna go. And then don't have those high expectations where it's way out there and then they don't meet those and you'd get disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that there are some relationships where, our expectations have to be clearly communicated, right? I don't know, what do you think? A romantic relationship, maybe you should probably clearly tell somebody, here's what I expect. I would like for us to talk once a day or twice a day, or, for you to text me in the morning and I'll text you in the evening, being really clear with what you're hoping to get out of the relationships makes it easier to be in relationship with people.
yeah, kind of just setting the bar of where you see it and then setting those boundaries underneath it.
Yeah.
Kind of like, just like a staircase kind of.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Savannah, for you, what has been helpful in making good relationships? I'm so curious.
I feel like for me, it's just maintaining like healthy boundaries in any relationship where you can be comfortable and also the other person can be comfortable as well, no matter what it is, if it's like borrowing some money or having a friend over, like neither one should be like super uncomfortable around each other.
Yeah.
So I feel
Yeah.
like that's one of the most important things that I focus on. It's like others' comfortability and versus mine, where I am and like who it is as well.
Mm.
It helps.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a great point, Savannah. It's like making sure you feel comfortable and you're not sacrificing your own needs or wishes in order to like please somebody else or make them feel good. That's such an important boundary.
Yeah. Also, I think some of the others vistas was wanting to know like what are some red flags to watch out for in friendships and other relationships.
Yeah, that's a great question. The funny thing about human beings is like we are evolved to be in relationship. We don't do well alone, right? But what we know about relationships is all coming off of what we've experienced prior to that relationship. So our whole history and our understanding of relationships is based on maybe what we experienced as a child or when we were a teenager or in other relationships beforehand. So we're always kind of trying to learn and grow and understand, oh yeah, that was something I grew up with that maybe was okay in my parents' relationships or my caregivers' relationships or other people's relationships, but that's not okay for me. And so it's kind of one of these things where you have to kind of go through it to find it. And I know that for a lot of young people, you know, it is a time in their life where maybe they're having their first serious relationships, like serious romantic relationships, really in-depth friendships, where they're like their BFF. And it's kind of this experience of like navigating that. And so first, know yourself clearly. And that's hard, right? Only time provides you the opportunity to like know yourself. But when something feels off, like you mentioned, Savannah, where you don't feel comfortable or like you just get that feeling of like, I don't feel so great about this, pay attention to that. That could be a piece of you internally saying, oh, there is a red flag here. I don't like that that person borrowed something from me without asking. Or I don't like that that person insulted me in front of my friends. They say relationships aren't just made up of the big things, but all the micro little things that happen throughout the day, kind of like the small things. Like, did they greet me and like make eye contact and smile at me and ask me how my day was? And, did they remember, that I don't eat tuna when they ordered sandwiches or something like that? It's all these little things that show you care in relationship. And it's the buildup of those things that, when done really well, make really healthy relationships. There's all these mini connections that you have. But if there are points where there's a misconnection or there's a miscue, or if there's a violation where they really do overstep your boundaries, that's a red flag. And that's something that you just need to pay attention to. But the tricky part about relationships is we have to learn in relationship. And so I wish there was like a list, like top 20 things to avoid when making new friends or dating. But I think it has to be so personalized to the person. Like for me, if someone's 15 minutes late, that doesn't bother me because I'm sometimes late too. But for other people, that might be a really important value and it might be a red flag. Like, hey, that person was 15 minutes late to meet with me. And that really doesn't sit well with me. And so they would have to communicate that. And also just say, like, that's something I value in a relationship. And maybe this person isn't the right person for me to date or be a friend with.
Yeah. Those all sound like really good. And I didn't think about like looking internally for like the small things and small signs instead of like everybody thinks that are like red flags is like a big thing that happened or a big event that, you're not agreeing on or something. And it's like, should be obvious. That's why they're called red flags. I didn't think about like the smaller ones that we probably don't even tend to like pay attention to.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if you've experienced this, Savannah, but I've experienced it at certain points in my life where sometimes I overlook the red flags because I just so want the person to be a certain way or to meet my certain needs. And then I learned the hard way later on that like, oh, that wasn't who they were ever going to be. That just wasn't that was what I had in my mind, but that wasn't who they were. And so kind of coming to those places of like, oh, this is what my expectations were, but this wasn't the reality of the situation. That can be hard. But I think it is also such a growth moment for ourselves to like learn about like, oh, sometimes I overlook red flags because I really desire a partner or I really wanted that person to be my friend.
Yeah. I think I've done that a lot of times and just didn't realize it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Hey, hindsight is 2020, huh?
Yeah. So, what would you say is the most common problem that ends friendships or relationships? Like just an overall general common thing that you see a lot.
I think miscommunication or not having the same values. So, maybe one person thinks that being a friend means that I can come to your house and crash whenever I need to and borrow $20. And, because we're friends, you would do that for me. And then the other person thinks, no, friends are people that, I call, I hang out with, but I don't need to have them stay at my house or borrow money for me. And then that causes a clash, right? Because it's a mismatch in values, but then also that nobody's communicated what they're kind of like hoping to get out of the relationship. And I think that's generally what causes a lot of relationships to end is like just not saying it out loud. We have a lot in our head that we carry around, but sometimes we don't say it out loud that like, oh, I was really hoping that a good friend would be somebody that I could stay with when I'm in a pinch.
Yeah. What would you say those like tips are for like just maintaining that communication?
Yeah. I think, oftentimes we expect other people to be mind readers. But the thing is like all of us come from different families, different backgrounds. If, you know, you came from a culture in which sharing is expected, and then I came from a culture where, I don't have to share. Those are all different things that are kind of just going on in the background of my mind, and that I need to say it out loud. And if you say it out loud in kind of a very kind of respectful, curious way, like, hey, I was wondering if you'd want to meet up today and eat lunch. I'd love to see you. It's been a few weeks and, I just want to connect. That's a lot different than saying like, hey, do you want to get lunch? Because you're not really saying like, why is it you want to get lunch? Oh, well, because I miss you or I was thinking of you or want to connect. And so I think like articulating those extra little bits helps it be clearer with your friends or with romantic partners. Or, if you do get into conflict, which is a really natural part of relationships, all relationships have conflict, is noticing what your kind of go-to defense mechanisms are and knowing that those things could end a relationship. Like for some people, it's giving the silent treatment when they're in conflict, or other people get really loud and kind of angry, that type of stuff. Those are all patterns that we've learned from our childhood that we're reproducing now in our friendships and relationships. And knowing, hey, like that probably isn't the healthiest for me. And I should think about other ways to kind of address conflict, which is, being a little bit more calm, being willing to listen. That's a big, big skill that's like, you just got to keep working on it over time. I'm always working on it. And not listening to respond, but like listening to understand. And when you can kind of understand the other person, it makes it easier to try and resolve the conflict or just talk through things. But it just takes time.
Yeah, I agree.
Have you had that experience with folks that there are like certain things that work when you're in conflict and not others or
Yeah, I think for me, like when they're not talking to me actively, like trying to have a conversation about like just a problem, I tend to ask questions and just I ask questions until they answer like in different ways and different things like, was it this? Was it me? Was it you? Like, and
yeah.
then sometimes I get an answer about, I feel like 60% of the time. So a little more than half, but then other times they just stay quiet and they're like, why are you yelling at me? It's like, I'm not. I'm
Yeah.
just legitimately asking questions.
Yep.
So the misinterpretation is like a big problem. that I've been like working on and just trying to make myself clear and like trying to not yell at a person, but it it's very hard when they don't respond with anything and they're just sitting there. It's like more frustrating.
Totally. Yeah. It it's like you can't engage with somebody that's like silent. So it makes you kind of like go even more like, well, what did I do wrong? Or what happened here? It makes you want an answer even more. And it's just one of those things that every human being has their own way of dealing with conflict. And it's good for each person to kind of do the self-exploration of like, ooh, yeah, that's the way that I deal with conflict that's not so healthy, you know?
Yeah, kind of have to like look into yourself and see what's happening with you before like you can react to somebody else's thing.
Totally, totally. It's tricky because, that I know, Savannah, you've done just like a ton of like work and self-reflection. And, there's a lot of people out there that are very self-reflective, and then there's other people out there that aren't. And so that may be something for young folks to think about is like, do I want to be in friendships or relationships with people that have done the work? Or am I willing to flex on that and know that they may grow more over time, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So I was also wondering what are some good ground rules while setting boundaries with friends and family?
Ooh, that's a good one. Were there any specific scenarios you guys were thinking of as far as ground rules or boundaries?
Well, me, probably with like siblings, I feel like, like when they overshare, how do you deal with that? Like if they're oversharing with problems that you can't fix, and it's
Mhm.
just like it gets too much, and it's like I blocked my one sibling a couple of times just because he doesn't want to respond or it's like months. It's not like weeks or days or hours, and it's like I don't know what to do besides do this. And it's like I've tried talking to the sibling and he just doesn't want to respond with anything good. It's always negative.
Ugh. Yeah, it's like the whole idea of like protecting your energy. Yeah.
Yeah, kinda like not getting yourself, drained with friends or family or not giving yourself away too much either if they need stuff.
Mhm.
And, like, you just keep feeling like this used feeling over and over again.
Yep. Yeah, it's a really tough situation, especially when it's family or somebody that you've been close with for a long time. I find that I kind of organize people in my life this way, which is like with family, it can be really tough, right? If you don't want to completely cut them out, you still want to have some relationship, then you have to start to think about in what capacity can I be in relationship with them? And maybe it's only that I can talk to them for 10 minutes at a time on the phone once a month, and that's what I can do. And so what I will do is if I get on the phone with somebody that's kind of like an energy vampire or they just have a lot that they need to share, I will always give myself a way out of that situation. So I'll say, like, pick up the phone, you know, hey, bro, I really want to catch up with you. I do have an appointment that I have to get to in 15 minutes, but I'd love to just hear how things are going and catch up. And then, I kind of let them do what they're going to do. And then when it's time, I say, it sounds like you're struggling. I think it'd be great if you talk to a therapist or, got yourself some support, but I got to go. And, I love you and I think of you and I hope everything kind of goes the way you need it to. And then just keep that boundary, right? And if it's like some people you can only talk to on the phone, some people you can only text with, some people are okay to meet with. There's this really nice metaphor that I learned from one of my former supervisors, which is I think about relationships the same way as I would if I lived in a house. So let's imagine that I owned a really nice house and it had a big plot of land and a nice little fence around it. There are some people that I wouldn't even let onto the land. I would just go meet them at the fence. Maybe it's like my postman. I meet him at the mailbox outside the fence and I grab my post from him and then I go inside. And then there's other people that I'm a little bit more familiar with, so I'll chat with them out in the front yard, right? And that's okay. And then there's some people, I really enjoy, but I still don't let them in the house. I just sit on the porch. We have a nice glass of iced tea together, that type of thing. And they know they're invited to hang out with me on the porch swing. Then there's friends that I allow them to come and enjoy a movie with me and we sit in my living room and, they go into the bathroom if they need to use the bathroom. They still don't go and like hang out in my bedroom type of stuff. And then there's people that I'm very intimate with, I'm super close with, and I'll let them stay the night. They may share my bed, that type of thing. But the most important thing is probably almost nobody in your life that you would allow to come into your house, rearrange all the furniture, and start telling you how you should, hang paintings on the wall or, where you should put your forks in the drawer, that type of thing. Those people really shouldn't exist, right? And so if we think of relationships that way, it may be that a friend that you used to allow into your house and sit on the couch, now because of just what they're going through or where you are in your life, you may just say, actually, they're just a front yard person. So maybe I only talk with them on the phone once a month, And then there may be people that earn your trust and the relationship deepens and you say, actually, you can come on into the house. So I think reflecting on where you are with your siblings. I mean, Savannah, you've done that. It sounds like this is a person that you wouldn't even invite into your yard right now. That could potentially change. But just being clear with like, okay, I know I can't give more energy to this person right now. So I just minimize my contact with them. And you did that by blocking them for a while.
Yeah, and I feel like it's not gonna, be a forever thing. It's just gonna be, like a shortened time period where then maybe he will realize like, hey, I shouldn't talk this way to this person. Like, I don't get everything for free. I don't get, you know, everything just handed to me like he does think. It's very weird. And it's very like just energy draining just listening to it, even though he isn't in the same state. It's just very off putting where it's like, I was going to go back for a little bit of the holidays, just here and there. And I asked my other sibling, my sister, to see if I could come back. And she was like, well, you should really tell somebody exactly when you're coming. You can't surprise anyone here. Like, it would throw some people off. And I'm just like, if if I felt comfortable enough to like surprise you guys, wouldn't that be a good thing instead of a bad thing? And I also like further explained that I wouldn't stay at their house. I wouldn't like invite myself that way over into like intrusive ways. I said like I would get my own room. I would have my own transportation. Like I was very clear about like how would I do it, and they still said no. So
Mhm.
it's just very weird, very like hard to navigate, but I'm still navigating it.
Yeah. Yeah, that hurts, right? Like when you try to be a good communicator, you try to reach out a hand to somebody, like I do want to connect. I do want to, you know, nurture this relationship that we have. And then when they say no, it hurts. I think that is like the hardest part of being a human being is that often happens to us, right? It's like we try to connect and then sometimes it's not reciprocated and that's painful. But the thing I hear, Savannah, for you is like you have this openness to like, okay, it's not going to work right now, but I still open to like trying the relationship again. Like you said with your brother, like maybe we won't talk for a little while. We need to cool off, but maybe he can come back. Maybe after he's feeling like he's in a better place or he gets the message of like, I can't listen to a lot of negativity. I want you to feel more positively about your life. That might be something that you're open to. And so it sounds like you can communicated that to him like, hey, man, I'm here for you. And, I also want you to do well and I want you to feel good about yourself. So when you're ready to do that, let me know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of like what I said to him. And he just didn't like interpret it like as a good thing, I guess. Not sure. But
Yeah.
yeah. Could you also tell us how can you tell people respectfully not to cross your boundaries?
I
Because
think
it's
about
kind of in this conversation.
Yeah, I think your example was great. All you can say to somebody is, you know, speaking a little bit of your truth. I usually use the I statement, for example, with your brother saying, sometimes when I get on the phone with you, I really hear a lot of negativity and, it sounds like you're struggling and I really want you to get support and that might be with a therapist or somebody else, but I know that I can't onboard that right now. I'm not in that place in my life. So, you know, I'd love to connect with you, but I want you to get some help. So maybe from here on out, maybe we'll just touch base, less frequently, or we'll only talk on the phone once a month, or let's just take a break for a while and circle back in like another month or two. You can say that to people. The tough part is their reaction might be big, right? Because people might feel hurt or, they feel like they're being dismissed, but we can't control other people's reactions. All we can do is try to, very respectfully and kindly relay our boundaries. And eventually people cool down, they calm down, they see the situation as it is, and hopefully they do come back around. But it's sometimes it's less about us conveying our boundaries and it's more about that other person's history of maybe not having boundaries set. And so they're not used to it. Maybe they're struggling with their own mental health, with, depression, anxiety, something like that. And it's more about where they are and less about your boundary. So just because people press into your boundary or say that they don't like it doesn't mean you have to change your boundaries, right? Especially if you've done the work of really clarifying, oh, this is what I need and this is how I want to engage in relationships. It's just about, I think, being clear. And it may feel like for some people, I know that I was born a people pleaser. And so it's hard to say no to people. But despite that, I still have to say no sometimes. And I just have to do it in a gentle way. So I really encourage people. It's a skill that if you keep practicing, it gets easier over time.
Yeah. I think in the past couple of years, I have like rebuilt that boundary of like saying no. But then I was, yeah, sure. Yeah. And, just fold in because they've asked too much or they asked too many times or they won't leave me alone about it. It was like super frustrating at one point where it's just like, I'm saying no in a nice way. I'm just going to have to say it no more firmly, more aggressively, more where they can just leave me alone finally. Some of those turned out to be like ending in friendships, and that's okay. People outgrow people and people like just change minds and don't think alike anymore. And that's okay. Like we're all different. We shouldn't have to force a relationship on someone like, please hang out with me. I need you. And all this, like, no one needs anybody, but it's nice to have people around. It's nice for your mental health, like to have good people that are like you. And
Totally.
yeah, you shouldn't have to change a person either to be around as well.
I totally agree with you, Savannah. And I guess that does bring up one good red flag that you talked about is like if people are saying, I need you, you're my only person, like I can't live without you, or if you don't do X, Y, and Z, I can't continue on. That's a red flag, right? Because that's a one-way relationship in which all the pressure is on you. And that doesn't feel good for anybody, right? Relationships are supposed to be collaborative, something that's a partnership, even if it's just a friendship. So I'm glad you brought that up because saying no in those situations, it's hard to do, but it sounds like you've done a beautiful job of just laying it out there, being clear and saying, no, I can't make that happen. I'm sorry, but that won't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I would like to know, how can someone regain someone's trust and mend a broken relationship of any kind if it's possible? Some of
Yeah.
them are not possible.
Uh-huh. Yeah, totally. Yeah, there are, I think it's hard, right? When we all make missteps in relationships. We talk about as therapists, even like we will make mistakes. We will do things in a therapeutic relationship that maybe hurt the relationship. But there's so much value in healing and, fixing the rupture in the relationship that sometimes makes the relationship even stronger. So, I wouldn't say don't try to avoid conflicts or mistakes or type of things in relationships, because if you do that, you'll just be so anxious in relationships. Get really good at trying to heal ruptures or hurts in a relationship. And the first thing to do is just to own it. I think accountability is really key in relationships. And that takes a lot of vulnerability because you're just going to have to admit that you're wrong or that you did something that wasn't the greatest, or you made somebody feel pretty poorly by doing X, Y, and Z. So that's step one, is just being accountable and being vulnerable and saying, I really messed up. I did X, Y, and Z. And then after you do that is saying, how can I make it right? Asking the other person. Because, I know for some people they say sorry, but then they just keep doing what they're that hurt the relationship in the first place, right? So ownership, accountability, vulnerability, and then asking how you can help heal the relationship. And that person may say, I need time and space. And then you give them time and space. Or they may say, if you can apologize and work on that behavior, that's good enough for me. There may be some situations like you talked about, Savannah, where they say, I forgive you. I understand you're asking for, this relationship to be healed, but it's too far broken. And I can't actually trust you again, or I don't want to be in a relationship with you. And you have to respect that, right? Like you have to just say, okay, that they made that decision and I understand. So again, it's about our expectations. We can't expect to have a rupture in a relationship and just to heal it with a quick, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Can we go back to normal again? It's like putting the ball in your friend or partner's court and saying, I really realize I messed up here. What can I do to make it right? Now, the flip side of that is if you make a mistake and you're really genuinely trying to heal the relationship, your partner or your friend shouldn't try to punish you for that, right? Because I've seen that too, where they say, well, we can get back together, but only after you've done da 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 da. And then they go on insulting and demeaning or, really making it hard for the other person. Punishing somebody in a relationship isn't a very mature, healthy way to be in a relationship, right? That hurts the relationship. It hurts your partner or that friend. So you got to think about, as the person that maybe has been wronged, like, can I learn to trust this person again? Can I really accept their apology as genuine and examine that for yourself? Because there's no point in trying to punish somebody else until you feel like they've made their rights wrong. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it'll cause more damage than anything.
Totally.
Totally fair.
Yep.
So, Youth Move Colorado focuses on the needs of youth that are unhoused. What do you think is important for young people to consider about trying to repair or not repair a relationship with family members?
That's such a great question, Savannah. Yeah. What were you guys thinking about when you wrote that question?
I think we were trying to ask, like, in terms of like foster care and like runaways and people that like it's purposely their families cause and effect of like them being unhoused.
Mm.
And I know some youth, majority of them do not like their family because of that. But then there is some, youth that want to try to like mend that relationship and mend that, family like type of feel to, not like come back to be housed with them, just to have like maybe a acquaintance friendship with them and like build off of that, or just like repair once was like to be their family member.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, it's so complex, right? Especially when everyone kind of comes from their own experience, right? Like maybe, their organic nuclear family did contribute to them being homeless, but maybe their parents now have done a lot of work and maybe they've gone through their own therapy or they're now in recovery or whatever. It could be something where a young person might say, well, they've done a lot of work and they've changed, and so I am open to letting them in. And then for other people, it may be that the hurt is too deep and they don't see much movement from their family on trying to genuinely outreach and connect and be in healthy relationship with them, that they may say, I've done too much work. I've gotten too far. I've really pushed myself in a direction to break the trauma cycle that I can't go back. I think you have to start to assess what your expectations are of that family if you do want to re-engage with them. Can you, like you said, Savannah, like maybe the expectations are set really low. Like I don't expect them to remember my birthday or to come to like any major life events, but maybe every once in a while I hop on the phone with them and just have a chat. And that's what we can do. The times that I've seen young people be most disappointed is when they reconnect with family and they have a lot of hope that maybe things will be different this time. And then they get disappointed and they're like, oh, it's just like it was when I was living back home. Or, you know, my caregiver doesn't see me a positive light and that doesn't feel good, you know? So I think, really getting familiar with like, okay, what is it I expect out of this? Can I see the humanity of my caregivers? Because that's another big part is like, if you've spent 18 years of your life, thinking about people in kind of a black and white way, like they're all good or they're all bad, can you start to imagine them as human beings that have their own struggles? And can you accept their flaws, that they'll never be perfect or they won't be, the Disney TV mom that you wanted, but can you accept like, this is who I have and what parts of the relationship can I think of as positive and what parts can I kind of know that won't change, but I also won't let enter my life? So I think it's a really complex question. I would encourage young people that if they're thinking about that, it would be a really good thing to bring up with a therapist to kind of work through, because that could take a while to think about in therapy. Like, do I want to get back in contact with my bio dad or with a foster parent? Because it's just something that is complex. And also, where are you at in your life? Are you pretty stable? Do you have lots of other supportive relationships? Are you feeling pretty good about yourself? Or are you in a tough spot right now where you don't feel so stable? Then maybe getting in contact with people that aren't so healthy might further destabilize you?
Yeah.
Or-
I also feel like if it is good for them as well, like if it's not like a situation to go back to, then you probably should either hold off on like going back to it or don't go back at all.
Mhm. Yeah. Right. How will it impact this person if I come back into their life too? It's a great,
Yeah.
yeah, it's complex and it's hard. Man, the work that we have to do individually, but then within our families it can be really daunting, but it also can be really rewarding because, I always think about how forgiveness will set you free. And so if you've really had a hard, childhood and you grew up with people that weren't so great, and then you, through your own therapy and own work, come to a place of like acknowledging their humanity and forgiving them even though you don't have a relationship with them, that will take a load off of you too.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do that. Nobody has to forgive anybody?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's all the questions I had. Thank you for answering them. And
Yeah. I know it's funny with therapists, people ask us to give them concrete answers. And it always with therapists is, it depends on the person.
the, this wraps up for our podcast for the interview of maintaining healthy relationships with Claire.
Thanks for having me, Savannah. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Claire.
Take it easy.
Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.